Hello, my name is Okechukwu Nzalu. I'm a lecturer in creative writing at Lancaster University, and here are 5 things you should know about Macbeth. The first thing you should know is that Macbeth was written for King James I. So King James I was Shakespeare's new patron, which basically meant that Shakespeare depended on the king for the production of his plays and for his sort of prosperity. So King James was already the King of Scotland, and he became the King of England in 1603 after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, making him the first king to be king of both countries. So it made sense to try and get in his good books because he was obviously a very powerful man, and Shakespeare did this by writing a play which was set in Scotland, about a Scottish king, and just full of things that would have been really interesting and relevant to King James, like the fact that it was full of witches, which King James was really fascinated by, and also the character of Banquo, his real life version, the real life Banquo, was actually one of King James I's ancestors. So clearly we can see that Shakespeare was very successful in getting into the king's good books. The second thing is that the weird sisters, or the witches, aren't necessarily quite so weird. So we use the word weird, W-E-I-R-D, to mean strange or odd or unusual. Actually, it comes from a much older word. So the Old English or Anglo-Saxon word, W-Y-R-D, means fate or destiny. So when Shakespeare is calling these witches weird, when he refers to them as the weird sisters, he's actually referring to their ability to tell the future, which is exactly what they do, and that's what kicks off the action of the play. Interestingly though, the weird sisters are still usually depicted as looking unusual or as outsiders in society. So often in productions we'll see that they are sort of portrayed as being androgynous, which means a mixture of masculine and feminine, and in Shakespeare's time being androgynous was a much more sort of daunting, problematic thing than it is today. The third thing is that people have believed in witches for a long time. So in Shakespeare's day, people did believe in witches, and this was not something unique to England at the time. People have believed and feared witches across cultures and time periods. Not everyone did believe in witches. Even in the 17th century, some people just thought that they were con artists or just mentally ill. However, if people who were accused of witchcraft, those people tended to be women, they tended to be old, they tended to be poor, which is largely because those people were the most vulnerable in society and the least able to defend themselves against that kind of accusation. In reality, obviously what was going on a lot of the time is that people just simply blamed these people for things that went wrong in their own lives that they didn't like. So for example, being ill or just having a bad harvest, that kind of thing was often just blamed on witchcraft. The fourth thing is that Macbeth was a real king. So we've already talked about the fact that there was a real-life Banquo who was one of King James's ancestors. Macbeth was also a real king, and so was King Duncan, but things worked out a little differently in history. So in the 11th century, a man called Macbeth defeated King Duncan in battle and took the throne. In the play, Macbeth murders Duncan in his bed. In real life, in history, Macbeth simply defeated him in battle. Another difference is that Macbeth was actually a very different kind of king. He ruled for 17 years, much longer than the period that we see in the play, and his reign was mostly peaceful. He wasn't the tyrant that we see depicted in the play, and Shakespeare, when he changes things like that for his plays, he's doing what a lot of writers do, which is play with the facts in order to produce a story that suits him better and is perhaps a bit more entertaining. The last thing you should know is that the play is actually about Catholics. So for most of Shakespeare's life, England was ruled over by a Protestant monarch, and this mattered because in that period of history in England, being Protestant, whether you were Protestant or Catholic, really mattered. It could be life or death, and the Catholic Church was very powerful in Europe outside of England, and many Catholics were very angry with the English because in 1534, King Henry VIII had broken away from the Catholic Church and made his own church, the Church of England. And as a fact, when Queen Elizabeth came to the throne, the Pope was so angry that he trained spies to come to England and declared that killing the Queen Elizabeth would not be a sin. So if these spies got caught, they had to find a way to hide their Catholic beliefs without lying about their Catholic beliefs, which would also be a sin. And this kind of half-truth-telling is called equivocating. So this is exactly what the witches do. They tell the truth, but they don't tell the whole truth, or they tell the truth in a misleading way. So when Shakespeare is writing this kind of equivocation, what he's doing is sort of writing about the dangers of it and trying to impress upon his audience how threatening it can be. So, those are the 5 things that you need to know about Macbeth. I hope that you have enjoyed learning that, and I hope that you enjoy studying the play.